So, welcome everyone. I'm so pleased to have you here with us for the Ashby Village Forum, our Village at 10, Strengthening Community. This forum is being sponsored by the program leadership team with input from the board, staff, and communications interest group. So the program leadership team created the forum today with the assistance of the board, staff, and communications interest group. This was specifically created to provide us with an important and valuable opportunity to recognize all that Ashby Village has accomplished and to hear your voices, what's been working, what's not been working, what needs improvement, and to continue charting our course for our second decade. My name is Andy Gaines. I'm the Executive Director, and I began serving as your founding Executive Director in August 2010, which was 1 month after our launch, just 10 years ago, 9.5 years ago. At that launch, we had 85 members, and these people were bold, founding members who had the vision of changing the way we were aging in our community and creating a new way. Just last month, our membership crossed the long, seemingly unreachable threshold of 400 members. Wow. And I think our growth is really demonstrative of something important. And looking around at all the people in the room who I recognize and know, and a couple new faces, it's really indicative of something powerful we've created. Today we'll begin by seeing who's in the room, and then we'll hear some stories about our beginnings and get some context about Ashby Village's evolution. We'll then hear a panel presentation by people who are representing the key leadership bodies of our village and have some time for Q&A. Then we'll get to the heart of today's gathering, which is to break down into small discussion groups, and you'll have a chance to share your experience and hopes for the future. Finally, we'll come together and we'll share reflections and continue to chart the course for our second decade. So with that, I'd like to pass the mic over to Laura Peck, Ashby Village's board member, who will be facilitating today's forum.
Hey! So we're thrilled to see this kind of a turnout. Not totally surprised, because this village has been built on the love and energy and contributions of its members and volunteers. So not surprising that when we come together to take stock of where we've been and think about what's important going forward, that people would show up as citizens of this village, and that includes members and volunteers. My job today my job has been to work with many others to shape the day so that it was the right combination of giving people useful information, but leaving lots of space for people to contribute their ideas so that we can harness the intelligence that's in this room. So just to get a sense of who's in the room, I'm going to ask a couple questions, and rather than stand up or move, just kind of raise your hand. So if you are a member, raise your hand. Woo. Thank you. If you are a volunteer, raise your hand. If you are a member who volunteers, raise your hand. Great. Thank you. If you've been part of the village for less than 6 months, raise your hand. Wonderful. Great. If you've been part of the village for less than 2 years, raise your hand. Nice. 3 to 5 years. More than 5 years. Wow. Yeah. If you were part of the village when we opened our doors, raise your hand. Wow. Okay. So as we say whenever we gather, it's really helpful to learn from the people who have been around and hold the memories. And it's really helpful to have questions and curiosity from the people who are new and want to figure out, why do you do it that way? And is there a better way? And I always wondered about this. If you've ever called the office, raise your hand. If you've ever received help from a volunteer, raise your hand. Okay, I want to ask about some participation questions. How many folks have ever attended a happy hour? All right. A holiday party. A neighborhood group event. An interest group. A healthy aging activity. Yoga, walking, Tai Chi. Part of Elder Action, one of our newer groups. Nice. So this is not a village of quiet members. This is a village of people who show up and co-create and shape what we need. So we do that activity because when you're going to function as a deliberative group, when you're going to bring forth your ideas, it's helpful to know the diversity in the room. And it's helpful to know what voices might be missing. So very useful to see, we could have gone deeper at different things, but useful to see how many people have participated in different ways. Useful to see that we really have an array of people newer and people who have been around from the beginning. And that is the story of who we are. We keep reimagining and reinventing ourselves as we go along. So second thing we're going to do before we move into some of the sharing our history and understanding how the village is organized. When you work with a group, if what you're after is it being really participatory and interactive, then it does not serve you to stand in front of the group in audience formation. So I'm going to ask you to turn to one other person. If it's uneven, feel free to do three, but turn to one other person and the question that you're going to answer, and we're going to practice discipline. So literally, you will have 1 minute. Time yourself. Okay, so each pair will have 2 minutes. So whoever goes first, you're going to use your watch or your clock or up there, and you're going to take a minute to answer the question, what do you value most about being a part of this village? What do you value most about being a part of the village? Go.
guess our time is up.
Okay. All right.
Is actually intended, it has an intention twofold. One is to get everybody's voice in the room. And secondly, that when you start with a question that focuses in an appreciative and curious way, it sets a tone for the work. So the question was specifically designed to remind us of, why do we all care? Why do we show up? Why are we meeting today? It's because we value something about the village and want to see it get stronger.
So, welcome. We're going to move now to the next two pieces are set up to give everybody a shared understanding of what's been the history and evolution of our village and how are we organized, how are decisions made, where is authority and responsibility vested, so that everybody starts with the same base of understanding. And then when we go into the small group conversations and then the full group conversation about what's working, what could be better, what ideas do you have, it's built on a shared understanding of what is and where we've been. So that's the logic of the afternoon of today. So I'm going to ask Pat Sussman and Steve Lustig to come up. Pat is one of our co-founders. And Pat's going to speak first, and then Steve Lustig, who has been on our board forever and has made enormous contributions. Well, just meaning I've seen an arc of Steve's contribution. Wherever he shows up, it's value added, and he's someone who has led large organizations and kept a perspective and kept us visible in the community. So I think both Steve and Pat bring a really important perspective. So Pat's going to lead.
My name is Pat Sussman, and sometimes I don't speak very loudly, so in the back of the room, if you can't hear me, please let me know. You can hear me. Oh, great. Thank you. I've been a member of Ashby Village actually since the beginning. Currently, I'm on the board, I'm on the planning committee, I'm on the development committee, and I'm on the finance committee. And the reason I've been involved with Ashby Village is that my good friend and neighbor, Shirley Haberfeld, who is not here today, and I thought, well, we need a village in Berkeley. On January 6, 2006, we both read an article in the New York Times about a group on Beacon Hill in Boston who had, they were sort of a group of neighbors of a certain age, and they got together to find out how they were going to support each other as they aged, and so they could continue to live on beautiful Beacon Hill. And they decided, well, we'll do it, we'll help each other. And, but the defining, I guess, event was, what really made them say, we're going to do this, is that one night in one of those Boston snowstorms, there was a woman who was standing in her attic with a rope, holding the rope like this, and on the other end of the rope was her husband, who was out on the roof, with the ice pick, so that the ice wasn't going to melt and then come down into the house. And as she was doing it, she said, I kept thinking, there's got to be another way. And there was. We've not had any exciting things like that, I don't think, at this point. The New York Times story presented the evidence of a parallel need that really resonated with so many people across the country. And like so many others in the country, Shirley and I said, perhaps this is something we should do. So we sent emails with a link out to a group of friends and neighbors, and we thought they'd be interested in this. And the silence was deafening. So we said, naively, but we'll do it. What sealed the deal was that Shirley was thinking about having her mother come to move closer. And she started to make some phone calls to aging services, various agencies, City of Berkeley, Alameda County, and she kept going from one phone to the next, one call. Oh, I'll transfer you. I'll transfer you. Deadlines. Oh, I've never heard of that one before. And so she said, this is, we've got to do something. We've got to do something that's meaningful, and so that people aren't going to face what we're facing now, this minute. So we got together a group of 10 women, 10 neighbors, and actually I had just pulled out, was looking through some files, and we're going to have an archive actually in March at the Berkeley Historical Society. But I was looking through some notebooks I'd kept, and there were the notes from our very first meeting in Shirley's living room. And there were 10 women, and we had 2 questions. How did your parents age? And how do you want to age? Every one of us, hands down, we want to remain in home, in our own neighborhoods. That's the bottom line. As are, I think it's 90% of people who are, I think it's 90% of people who have been asked about that, yeah. So we said, okay, where would we be? Well, we lived in the Elmwood area, 94705, and we'd be there, maybe a little bit of Oakland, and that sounded good. Well, name, well, Ashby Village, everybody knows where Ashby is, it runs east-west. Okay, we'll be Ashby Village, it's right in our neighborhood. And then if any of you know the late Ted Rozak, Ted said to Shirley, you cannot only be in that neighborhood. You've got to come to North Berkeley. As a matter of fact, you've got to come to all of Berkeley. And so we said, well, okay, we'll try that. And, but meanwhile, Beacon Hill really was beginning to be well known. They had put together a manual of how to build a village. And so Shirley went to the very first conference. I think there were 50 people from across the country for the first conference, Village to Village Network, and brought back the manual that we absolutely devoured. And then we said, well, we've got to know what we've got here, so we began to look at local demographics. We talked to experts in aging here in this community, and believe me, there are a number of people who have worked in this field for a long, long time. And for the next 2.5 years, we spent a lot of time in meetings, and we were introducing the concept to the community. We're fortunate that we live in Berkeley and, surrounding communities. I say Berkeley, but I mean all of our area. Because so many people who shared their expertise and guided us from the university, business, and field of aging, just picked it up and ran with the idea of let's do a village. So early on, there were a couple of organizations that were really extraordinary. Lifelong Medical Care, if you're familiar with that, the old Over 60 Health Center, served as our fiscal sponsor before we got our own nonprofit status. Jewish Family Services of the East Bay was helping us explore the ages of home health management, and then they had their own aging department. Andy Sharlock, UC School of Social Work, who was doing a lot of interesting research. And then we had a pro bono law firm that wrote up our articles of incorporation and did all of the work that needed to be done to get our status, to get working with the IRS, and they did not charge us 1 cent. And I am forever grateful. It's Hanson and Bridges, which is in San Francisco. So Shirley and I made appointments to get advice. There were a number of people whose shoulders we wept on and said, this will never happen. But along the way, everyone said, it's going to happen. I mean, people really believed in this, and they believed in what we were doing, and this tremendous amount of energy. Also, we got our first office at Durant House, which is across, next to the Congregational Church in Berkeley. It is their little house where many, many nonprofit organizations have incubated, and we were one of them. So we had community workshops, we had living room chats, and there were so many people volunteering who said, what can I do? What can I pick up? We had well over 200 people who were at probably a year out from launch who were doing something. We had a lot of breakfasts at Saul's, asking people to be on the board, Andrew. And, but what did we need to know as we built this village, aside from the concept? You know, what are the boring parts? And so we decided as we were building this administrative model, you'd have a budget. Well, you have to have membership dues. How much are we going to charge? Actually, our membership dues, unlike most villages in the country, have never changed. Policies and procedures, insurance, a website. Shirley, who was a therapist in the Lafayette School District, did our first website. She knew nothing about websites. It's fantastic. So all of the kind of nuts and bolts, but there were thousands of hours, and as I said, I think over 200 people, all volunteering their time and experience. And I want to close to say two things. One of them is about volunteers, and a story, something that happened very early in Ashby Village's life. We had a wonderful volunteer who worked in the office, a man who was a very skilled workman. And one of our members called one morning and said, I just had my trees trimmed, and a large branch has just come down and has crushed one corner of the table that we have out on our patio. Is there anyone there who can fix it? Now, this is a pretty complicated job. And this wonderful guy said, you know what? I've got my tools in my truck. I'll come up and take a look. And he did. And he fixed it. And he was coming back the next day because there was a lot of glue involved. And he came back the next day, and our member said, well, I'd like you to come and have lunch with me. And thank you. And they walked into the dining room, and there was one place sitting, just one place sitting. And she said, well, come and sit here. And he said, well, you've got to join me. And started to talk. And the woman's husband had been a well-known architect and landscape designer, and he had built that table 50 years before. He also died in the last few years after a long illness. But it was the table that they used to sit at every night when he'd get home from work to talk about their day. And now it was whole again. That story still just is so indicative of who we are and what we are. Yeah, it's light bulbs and all those things we need, but it's also these deep kinds of things that happen. And then what's most precious to me, you know what, I've made friends here, see many of you, who I would have never met before, who've become very, very important in my life. So Shirley and I felt it was the best thing that we ever tried, and it was, and it is, and I can't believe that we're getting close to our 10th anniversary. So here is Steve.
So my name's Steve Lustig, and I'm on the Ashby Village Board and very active in the planning and governance committees on the board. But my primary focus has been representing and working with the community to make sure that Ashby Village presence is out there, but also to address issues around aging that affect all of us, whether we're members or not. An aspect that I appreciate both in the community projects I work on and in the village is that it's community driven. It's the members and the volunteers that drive the organization, and that's a rare feat. And 10 years in, it's really a model, I think, for other people. I became involved in the village in 2011 when I was asked to co-chair the strategic planning process. At that point, it was the first one, and as Pat says, it was launched and someone wisely said, you know, you need a plan. So here was the plan, and it was nice of the person to ask me to co-chair it because after the first meeting, he vanished. So, but I met a lot of people on that committee, and then in the business planning process that followed it the next year. And you can imagine my surprise when I started this process that I found an organization that really captured my interests in a number of different ways. Community organizing, which I'd done, organizational development, which I'd done, and of course I was aging, so that seemed to fit pretty well. My graduate program in the late 60s was funded by the National Institute of Health, and it was called Adult Development and Aging. And I hadn't worked in that field until I retired and came back as an older person. One of the things about that program, when I look back at the notes, is the lifespan of men was 69 and women was 74. So if you think now that we're all living into our 80s, and if you adjust for race and class nationally, it's 79, so it's still creeping way up there. So I reflect on this because of the importance of the village peer support model in addressing the needs of our growing population, and also addressing the fact that services and supports are going to be highly pressured by the growing population. And this niche of people reaching out, working with each other, is a major component of how to address that growth. So I want to spend a few minutes on our internal growth and how it's addressing some of these issues I just raised. The early years were focused on development of services to members, drivers, gardeners, home repair people, kind of like Pat just mentioned, someone needs something and calls and a volunteer comes out and helps. And then new services got developed for the demands from members, such as MedPal, the decluttering program, and member support functions such as social care and connections program. During this time, we also ratcheted up our terrific volunteer program, which is a model training program. We now have trainings quarterly with 20 to 30 people at all of them. So it's being utilized highly. After several years, we began to realize through surveys and community member feedback that our core strength was really building community. And this has led to continued development of member engagement programs, such as our education and culture events, the arts and culture series, Embracing Change series, and monthly presentations and happy hours. Also, more interest groups and support groups, retirement series, the macular degeneration and hearing loss groups, the over 90s group. By the way, the fastest growing segment of the population right now is over 85. So it's amazing. Next steps, and a forum for examining housing issues with aging. We have a really active science group and a growing elder action group. So this is all driven by interest of the community members. As we grew, also came the birth and increasing importance of neighborhood groups. And this is something that we just talked about during that 2-minute break, is having smaller groups where you can really engage with each other and not all large events. So a combination of the two things together. Also, our work with member engagement teams to reach out and assist new members to become involved in their first year of membership. And then to meet this evolving panorama of activity, it's required growing staff and customizing the technology, which has now shifted over to Salesforce so we can get better data for planning and also respond quicker to requests. So this is kind of a quick overview, and I'm sure I left some things out. Apologies to anybody that I left out, of the internal picture of the village, but it also has an external face that's been growing over the last few years. Several years ago, we became involved in conversations in the community about the changing demographics and how to address the demands on our systems of services and supports. And also basic to our mission is opportunities for increasing social engagement, encouraging volunteerism and community connection, and decreasing isolation. So in order to have a greater impact on the conditions around us as we age, it does require us to work with these other organizations. And that's both to benefit the village, because we're connected to it, but also we earn money from the grants. And also to be part of the solution for the larger community. And through these conversations, the opportunity to partner with the city and several community-based organizations evolved, and Ashby Village Board decided to serve as a fiscal sponsor for all of the city's age-related initiatives. And these include the Berkeley Continuum, which is a consortium of organizations with some grant funding focused on specific areas such as housing. Age Friendly Berkeley, which is a municipal plan driven by community surveys and focus groups that addresses priority actions needed to make Berkeley more age-friendly. And Berkeley Home Match, a pilot program linking older adults with spare bedrooms with graduate students and visiting scholars from the university. And we're instrumental in helping launch Village Movement California, composed of villages throughout the state. So these efforts have led to greater visibility for Ashby Village and help to impact change in the community that affect all of us as we age. So kudos to all of you for driving the organization to this point. Thank you.
So I know that that was rich and that you were also sitting. So I want to see how many people learned something they didn't know beforehand. Sam, what's one thing you learned that made you surprised? You didn't know.
Well, I didn't know much about the age-friendly Berkeley and
Some of the external.
the external connections. Yeah.
Great. Who else learned something they didn't know? I saw. Evelyn.
A very funky little bit. I never knew where the name Ashby Village came from.
Which is, that's great. So, as many of us have heard before, you have to know your history and what you're building on in order to usefully shape your future. So, part of the intent here has been to look at how have we grown, how have we responded, and adapting means some things grow and other things fall away, because the idea is we don't have all the resources in the world, but we have the talent and gifts of the members of the village. So when there's something people care about, they make it happen. And that's what I think I want to continue to invite people to think about, is that your membership dues are a passport to many supports and benefits and services. It's also an invitation to shape one of the most innovative social programs out there. There aren't a lot of answers and ready-made solutions for what happens to our generation as we age. So being part of this village and growing it is a way of helping to shape not only our future, but to shape the possibilities for people in our communities and in our state. So I just want to continue to invite you to both take in the information and then notice, what do you get excited about? What intrigues you? What might you want to participate more in or know more about? So right onto that, then the next piece Andy's going to take lead on, which is many questions as we've grown and evolved. It's a dynamic organization. Questions come up about who's in charge, who makes what decisions, how do I raise my voice?
I have a thought. Who do I, how, whoa. So this next section is, now that we understand some of the history and the growth and the complexity of how we've evolved, how have we managed to organize ourselves in a way that amazing amounts of work gets done with 4 paid staff? Everything else is volunteers. So Andy's gonna, with amazing support, is gonna help with this section. And we will take questions at the end of this section.
So I will introduce our panel as we move along, but I'll start. Last fall, recognizing the increased size and complexity of the organization and wanting to ensure that we were functioning optimally, I commissioned an organizational assessment by one of our high-capacity volunteers who's here today. Thank you, Linda. So, yes. In January, following her deep dive interviewing of approximately 20 leaders, staff, teams, and committees, she presented me with a valuable report of the strengths and deficits of the organization with recommendations for how to improve things. Much has happened since then, with many recommendations outlined in the report already acted upon. And it's from here that I'd like to present the linchpin of what keeps Ashby Village operating, its staff. Stirred by the report, an ad hoc team of staff and volunteers spent the first half of this year revising our staffing structure, roles, and responsibilities. I'm proud to introduce today our teams, our staff team, comprising a total of 4.05 full-time equivalent staff. So I'm going to start, and then we'll go through. So I'm Andy Gaines, and I'm the executive director. I maintain ultimate responsibility for Ashby Village programs, services, and organizational excellence. What I appreciate most about Ashby Village is the people I meet every day who have had such extraordinary lives, like many of you, and readiness to continue living and sharing that with others in a really fun, joyful way. I'd next like to introduce Pat Carvalho.
Hi, Gretchen. Thank you. As you know, I'm Pat Cavallo. I've been with the village since 2011. I started off as a volunteer. I worked in the office and I drove members to doctor's appointments. And a year later, I became part of the staff in 2012. I am the operations and volunteer manager. And my core responsibility is operations of the office and the office core, and anything to do with the volunteer program. So that includes recruiting, training, retention, support, and engagement. So a whole bunch of stuff in there. And recently, I got a few teams added to my responsibility, so I'm really happy to tell you that I'm also responsible for the new member welcome team, the home safety assessment team, the declutter team, member engagement, and exit interviews. So what I appreciate about Ashby Village, I actually wrote it down because I've been with this for a long time, so I have 3. I get 3.
You get 3.
I get 3, okay. So I work pretty closely with volunteers, and I'm always amazed at their capacity to give, and the dedication that they have towards helping members and to grow our village. So that is an amazing appreciation. Also, I'm so grateful, as Pat said, for the friends that I've made. I probably would have never met some special friends that have supported me through my personal life. And lastly, I'm delighted that I get to bring my dog to work. Her name is Lola, and yes, whatever Lola wants, Lola gets. And that's it. Thank you.
I'd next like to introduce you to Eric Whitaker, one of our 2 new staff members.
Hello everyone, my name is Eric Whitaker, and I have been an Ashby Village staff member since June of this year. I'm the program manager, I'm the program and member support manager. My primary responsibilities include maintaining oversight of the social and educational programming, building connections between members and their neighborhoods, and developing partnerships with community resources and programs. So that means I support the events and educational programming, neighborhood groups, member support, which includes the social care team, the connections team, healthier aging and embracing change, as well as the interest and support groups. And one thing I most appreciate, or the three things that I most appreciate about Ashby Village, is the people that I work with, not only staff, members and volunteers, the continued connection with older adults, and being part of an innovative model of senior support. So again, I'm super thrilled to be here, and thank you all for being here as well.
Next, I'd like to introduce Sue-Yin Bickner, who is our newest staff person.
Hello everyone, my name is Sue-Yin Bickner. I am the newest staff member. I've been here for a little bit over a month. I'm the project coordinator, so I'm in charge of communications, both internal and external. The outreach ambassadors team is my team, go team. I'm supporting Andy and his projects, fundraising. I'm helping with the development committee as well. And I'm honored to be here. It feels very full circle. I was actually a volunteer back in 2016, went back for my master's degree at Berkeley, and I'm back. So I'm inspired by the passion that I see from this organization, and I'm very honored to be here. Thank you so much.
And finally, Kate Sasson, who couldn't be here today, who many of you have spoken with on the phone. Kate began volunteering in 2014 and continues today as a part-time administrative assistant managing member service requests and accounts receivable. And Kate had sent me her appreciation, which I couldn't get on my phone, but I believe it was speaking with many of you each day and the amount of care that she receives in her calls. So with that, I'd like to now pass it over to Andrew Lichtenstein to talk about the board of directors.
Hi, good. My name's Andrew Lichtenstein. I've been a member since 2008 or 9, I don't remember, but before we started, I'm currently the president of the board, and I serve on all the board committees, which I'll tell you a little bit about. I'd like the members of the board to please stand up so that everybody can see you. If you want to know anything more about these really experienced and wonderful folks, the website has brief bios on every board member, their experience and the skills that they bring to the board. What I most appreciate about the village is the community, like everyone else says. And if I can just tell a quick story, it's not in my script, but when we first started and we would do living room chats and we would push the services and push the services, and Steve Lustig said, you know, you're really marketing decrepitude. You need to focus on the community. And, you know, I think a lot of people here have heard that people come for the services, but they stay for the community. So, the board has gone through many changes since the beginnings. We, like most nonprofit organizations, started with a founding board with everybody having their hands in everything. Over time, with a lot of help, some pain, we did transform ourselves into more of an institutional board. And that's a little bit what I'd like to tell you about today. What I have to tell you is pretty dry facts, but I know a lot of people are interested in what it is that the board does. So the board is responsible for governing the village, making sure we have necessary financial and human resources to function. We oversee the strategic and business planning, including the development of the mission. We make sure that we're operating within the law. We ensure the financial health of the village and approve the annual budget. We hire and evaluate the executive director. We also develop and maintain relationships with the community at large. And specifically, we do not have oversight of day-to-day operations. So the board is made up, per our bylaws, we can have a minimum of 10 members, a maximum of 15. We now have 13 members on the board. 51% of our board must be Ashby Village members, and currently 10 of our 13 members are members of the village. The executive director and a representative of the program leadership team also sit on the board as non-voting members. We have term limits, and this was part of our evolution. So when they said Steve's been on the board forever, he can't be on the board forever, much to our chagrin. But we basically serve 3-year terms, and we can't serve more than 2 consecutive terms, and you have to take time off. Potential board members are recruited from folks who we can identify who can fill certain needs that the board has at any given time. Legal, finance, experience in the broader aging field, experience in fundraising, and that's giving or getting, or both. Members are expected to make donations and to have Ashby Village be one of their major philanthropic causes, and to donate at least annually. And many of us donate much more than that, aside from our time. We have an annual meeting in July, and beginning in this next July, that annual meeting will be open to any member or volunteer who wants to attend. And there'll be a Q&A opportunity during that board meeting. Also, beginning just recently, all the minutes of board meetings are now going to be posted on the members' pages of the website. And right now, you'll see July and October there. The August meeting, July and September. This August meeting was canceled. So the board has 5 committees. We have an executive committee, and that's made up of the 4 officers. And Laura Peck is the vice president. Betty Webster, who's not here today, is the secretary. And Janet Howley is the treasurer. Janet also is traveling somewhere. So, and what the executive committee is responsible for are setting the agendas of the board meetings, and we're also the personnel committee. We have a governance committee that Laura chairs, and basically responsible for the health and functioning of the board, for board evaluation, and for recruiting and nominating new board members. The finance committee, which is open to any non-board member who would like to join, who has financial experience, just let us know, please. Overseeing the budget process and financial reporting, fiscal policies, and so on. The development committee, also open to anyone who is not a board member, and let us know if you really love asking people for money or figuring out strategic development planning. We do fundraising for individuals, corporations, and some foundations. And it's been incredibly successful committee. We're very blessed. It's chaired by Jan Carrazza. Is Jan here today? Not there she is. We also have the planning committee, and that's it's a board committee, but it's also open to non-board members, and also a representative from the program leadership team sits on that committee. The chair of that committee is Karen Grimsich, who would be here, but she bought a one-way ticket to Nepal and a return ticket from Chile for 3 months. We're not sure, and she wasn't sure what would happen in between. But she chairs our planning committee. I hope that our planning committee a little more structural. The planning committee oversees long-range strategic and business planning and oversees the goal setting that the board is going to do. And this is something relatively new as we've evolved. And the 4 areas that the planning committee is looking to oversee at each board meeting, one at each board meeting, is communications, operations, sustainability, and partnerships. In these 4 areas, the planning committee and board members will develop the goals for each year. Also, the planning committee keeps abreast of any initiatives or policies in the aging and public health fields and builds relationships with key community partners. So that's the broad overview. It's a lot of detail, but there'll be time for questions shortly.
I'd like to now invite Roberta Pressman to speak about the program leadership team.
Let's see. Okay. Can you all hear me? Yep. Okay, I tend to have a low voice, so put your hands up if you can. So happy to be here today. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank my colleagues on the program leadership team for the honor they have given me in asking me to represent them here today. And I'd like you all to stand, those of you on the program leadership team, as I read your names. Holly Glenn, Sigrid Duesberg in the back, Emily Sexton, Mary Jo Powell, where are you, Mary Jo? Joan Stramanis, Joan Cole, and Irene Marcos, a long-term member who unfortunately is home with a broken arm. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what motivated me to become one of the leaders of the program leadership team, and then tell you about the PLT. And I think you'll notice woven through all of this are pitches for you all to think about maybe stepping up into leadership positions at Ashby Village. So I became involved with Ashby Village a little over 10 years ago when, having just arrived from Boston and very eager to make some friends, an acquaintance of mine said, "Why don't you come to a meeting tonight about this interesting idea, something about a village?" And this began for me, and that actually was in Shirley's living room. This began for me a 10-year adventure filled not only with friend-making and community building, but also with interesting challenges and just plain fun. I consider myself incredibly lucky not only to have been able to observe the evolution of this fascinating organization, but also for the opportunities Ashby Village afforded me, namely to remain mentally active and creative as an older adult. As an Ashby Village member, I've had the opportunity to imagine and then create the member support services for our village, the companionship program we call Connections, and have laid to start the Healthier Aging Initiative, aimed at getting us all to become more physically active. I served 2 terms on the Ashby Village Board, and I'm now a member of the program leadership team and on the steering committee of Elder Action. All interesting, challenging activities that enabled me to work with terrific people. I tell you this not as an advertisement for myself, but as a way of asking all of you who are not actively involved in the village to think about the numerous activities and fun you too can also have in taking on leadership positions in the village. But my major task today is to tell you about the activities of the current program leadership team. So what is the PLT, which is the way we normally refer to the program leadership team? As our board transitioned from an operational board, or you called it something else, founding board, yes, to a governing board, it withdrew from the everyday oversight of village activities, and the program leadership team was organized and delegated to oversee the numerous teams and activities in the village. Our team consists of the leaders of the major village teams, like events, member support, outreach, volunteer recruitment, and several others. All staff attend our meetings, and Andy Gaines chairs the monthly meeting. The PLT reports directly to Andy, and we serve as a consulting group to him, providing him with up-to-date information about the activities of our teams, as well as team issues that might be problematic or in need of attention. Our mandate is to review existing programs to ensure their quality and their consistency with Ashby Village's mission. But we're also, and this is really important, a sounding board for each other, providing the time and the space for team leaders to bring up problematic issues and to problem solve together, as well as to learn from each other about best practices and improve our leadership skills. We send a member of PLT to all board meetings, bringing them information about our activities and getting reports back from the board to us. We also try to be a clearinghouse for sharing ideas and concerns between the teams and the PLT. And this area of reciprocal communication is one we're working on and really needs improvement and expansion, so that we're able to hear from you, the larger community, and not just our individual teams. To serve you well, we need to hear from all of you. So don't hesitate to contact us if you have questions, suggestions, concerns, and we'll work on doing a better job of reaching out to you. In concluding, I want to mention one of our most important activities as team leaders, which is succession planning. This involves our identifying members or volunteers in the village with leadership potential and recruiting and mentoring these individuals so that we can have smooth transitions on all of our teams. Being active at Ashby Village can be joyful, fun, and mentally stimulating, as I have tried to indicate earlier, and has been so true for me. So keep us in mind, there's so much talent in this audience, and your participation is needed and welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Roberta. I'd like to finally call up Sam Fouchi to talk about the Neighborhood Group Council.
Hello, I'm Sam Fouchi. I joined Ashby Village in 2012 as part of a group of 22, I believe, residents of Watergate condominium complex in Emeryville, and we all joined together. So we were essentially a neighborhood group before we became part of Ashby Village. The following year, 2013, the fall of 2013, the Neighborhood Group Council was established as a group of leaders from the neighborhood groups that had formed at that time to help with the whole process of neighborhood groups becoming stronger and offering more to our members. One of the things that I value most about my time on the Neighborhood Group Council and being a member of Ashby Village is, and you've heard this from lots of other people, is just the interesting people that I've gotten to know that I wouldn't have gotten to know otherwise, and the friends that I've made. And you know, the Watergate, which is where we started, most of the people that were part of our group at Watergate, I didn't know before, even though I had lived there for like 20 years at that point. So just kind of what happens. So neighborhood groups in Ashby Village, as many of you may know, began forming early on in the process. And they grew out of a desire for many members to get to know, to have a greater sense of community and get to know their neighbors, the people that lived around them. And especially as the membership of the village grew, it was just harder and harder to get to know all the people from the various neighborhoods of our service area. And so the neighborhood groups filled a need, I think, for people to get to know people that live close by and to do things with people to get close by, and that was certainly how we felt in Emeryville. The council itself, the neighborhood group council, was formed in the fall of 2013, and it had the purpose was to clarify the mission of neighborhood groups and to support the existing ones, to help initiate new groups, and to provide a forum for sharing ideas and best practices for what was working with the neighborhood groups that were already going. We even put together a manual of how to start a neighborhood group back in about 5 years ago, and that manual actually has been shared with neighborhoods, with villages around the country that were interested in pursuing the same model for their villages. And the neighborhood group council has always been made up of the leaders from the various neighborhood groups. And currently there's 7 of those. There's North Berkeley, which is mainly the hills of North Berkeley. North Towns, which is the name of the Kensington, basically the Kensington group. Emery Bunch, which is our group in Emeryville, which is expanded to include all of 94608, which is Emeryville and parts of Oakland. And the Midtowns group, which is the area roughly in central Berkeley. The Thousand Oaks Hamlet group, which is the group in this area where the office is located, Solano Avenue, Thousand Oaks. Outlandish, which is the name of the group over in North Oakland, off of kind of the Rockridge area and the adjoining areas of Berkeley, and then Clairwood, which is contiguous, which is the Claremont, Elmwood area of Berkeley. And each neighborhood group is unique, and each has involved its own organization and its own activities kind of organically. And some of the neighborhood groups have been more active than others, depending on the leadership of the individual ones and also on the interests of the members of those neighborhoods. I'd like to just acknowledge the members of the council because they represent the neighborhood groups that are currently functioning. So from North Berkeley is Don Hubbard, and from I'm sorry?
Diane Ressick.
Oh yeah, Diana Resnick. Yeah, Diana's here? Oh, sorry, Diana. Let's see, we have Mary Graham from Northtown. And we have Carol Tataki and Mary Jo Powell from Thousand Oaks Hamlet. And Allison Colgan, is she here today? No. I don't think Allison was able to make it. She's from the Outlandish, the kind of Rockridge group. And Irene Rosenthal, sorry about that. Rosenthal from Clairwood. And I think that's our members. Did I miss anybody? I'm sorry?
Midland.
Yeah, Midlandish, and currently Veronica Fuchsen.
And Roger
right here, and
Roger Pritchard.
Roger Pritchard, yes. Is Roger here? Thank you. Sorry, I blew that. Sorry about that. So another interesting thing about the neighborhood groups, in case you didn't know this, is that neighborhood groups do welcome people from outside of their neighborhoods to their activities. It seems to be a misconception that some people have had. The neighborhood groups and their activities are not exclusively for neighborhood groups unless there's some reason that, like space considerations sometimes have influenced that. But in general, activities are available for all. And they do provide, the council does provide a forum for sharing of ideas and solving problems, as I mentioned before. And also we are a kind of a channel for connecting all the members of the groups, the members on the ground with the Ashby Village leadership. So, and currently the neighborhood group council meets monthly. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to take 10 minutes or less for questions. And I invite questions of understanding. We've all been places where the questions are more editorial comments, but so that is welcome, and there's plenty of time for that in the afternoon. So the purpose of this has been to make sure people have a shared understanding of what is. So if there's anything that's not clear or confusing, or you want to ask about or add to, we have surrounded you with microphones. So raise your hand over here. And maybe Dan stand so we can all, as someone who has hearing loss, that would help. And say your name.
Diane Justin, and I'm wondering what are the teams for the program leadership team? I didn't understand the list of teams, and I'm wondering how the leaders are selected.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, let's see if I can get them all. You'll have to help me out. We have the membership recruitment team, which runs the living room chats. And we have the member support team, which is the team that's made about social care, healthy aging, and the Connections program. We have the events team that Sigrid runs. We have the newer team. Mary Jo, what are you calling your new team?
Neighborhood Group Council.
Oh, that's right, Neighborhood Group Council, which always was on our team, but had dropped off for a while, so they're back. Who might be? Well, yeah, I mean, the staff is there, but I'm thinking about the individual teams. What other teams have I left out?
Outreach ambassadors.
Excuse me?
You mentioned volunteers.
Yes, yes. And, that's right. It's both the outreach and the volunteer recruitment team, yeah, which Holly does a great job with.
And then there are a few people who have played different roles in supporting the organization through strategic planning, etc. Holly does volunteer recruitment. So those are also represented on the PLT, but it's as there's a couple people who are added to the team leads.
So Diane, did that answer your question? That there's a combination of...
They were selected.
How are people selected? We wake them up in the middle of the night.
Well, we've all come to, the different teams have come to it in a different way. I could talk about the member support team, which I started, and basically I was just scurrying around the village trying to find people with social service backgrounds and an interest in working and developing social services for the village. And then they would tell people about it and say, would you like to join up? And pretty soon we had about 10 people on our team. I think different teams have worked in different ways. Joan, would you like to talk about how you started the outreach team, or how you got your members?
I started the community outreach team, which now Joan Stramanis is chairing. And how I did it was I begged, borrowed, I cajoled people, and
You actually tricked me.
and I tricked her. And our job was, we had quite a large group, including Marcia Friedman, who ran the leadership, who ran the Speakers Bureau, and then all of the neighborhood groups, which all of you have been to a neighborhood group, I'm sure. We ran all of those, and I just got involved because I'm an old community organizer, so it felt like the right place for me to be. And I had been a member of the village since before the launch, and it was more fun than anything I'd done in a long time. And then it was time for me to turn it over to Joan Stramanis. I don't know if that answers it, but you know, if you have an interest and you have a talent, let us know about it, because we need you.
That's just what I was going to say. Is that the teams are basically open. It's not like we've gotten to the point where we say, no more people. We're overrun with people. So if there are teams you are interested in, please do contact the team leader and let them know. We'd love to meet you. Okay? Good that? Angie?
I have another question for Bert.
You're here.
Can't hear her. I have a question for Roberta Preston. I want to know if she's going to lead us in a stretching exercise. We've been sitting for over an hour, and sitting is the new slogan.
You are absolutely correct, but you know what? Andy's the guy who's the best at leading us in that. We'll do that in a few minutes.
So that is a great cue, and before we do move into our next section, we will do a little moving around. Thank you, Audrey. Any other questions? Go ahead first.
Sandra Whistler.
Sandra.
My question is, how does financial management happen? All the way from bookkeeping, accounting, fiscal services, how the budget gets made, all that stuff.
Sure. I, as the executive director, am responsible for preparing. As the executive director, I'm responsible for preparing the budget, etc. I work with our accountant. We have an accountant that we had a pro bono accountant until this fiscal year, and now we have a paid accountant, and work with the finance committee of the board to build out and clarify the budget for the coming year. And then we have done monthly, we're going to be doing quarterly reviews of the budget at the board meeting, just to make sure we're on track, etc., make any adjustments. So the finance committee is overseeing that, and we have a bookkeeper who works with me on a weekly basis, a wonderful volunteer who has volunteered since almost the beginning to keep everything up to date.
Joan.
This is such a silly question. I'm Joan Stramanis. I hesitate to ask it, but I wanted to ask Pat Sussman. When you told us the story about the repair of the table, did you tell us why only one place setting was there? I didn't hear the punchline.
Well, that's a very good question. It was because she, the member, wanted to just make lunch as a way of thanking this volunteer. And she was going to wait on him. A lady of a certain age who kind of did that. So that's all I know.
And he invited her to sit down, because that was what was important to him. Any other questions about our history and/or about the different groups you've heard about before we take a stretch break?
I'm interested in...
Tell us your name.
My name is Ann Law. I see that we're almost all white here, and we all live in pretty nice neighborhoods. And is that because we need that much money to keep Ashby Village afloat, or is there a way that we could become more diverse? There's seniors everywhere who need this kind of help.
That's a really good question, and nationally that is an issue. About 85% of members nationally are white, middle class, people from similar neighborhoods. We have a number of things going on right now, so I'm going to do a short history of where we went with that question over the years. Rather than just reaching out and bringing in a few members from here and there, part of our reason for getting involved with the community was to partner with other organizations who aren't like us. And through that, getting to know each other and either increase our membership or together impact conditions in our community. And that is working well as far as our partnerships and our consortiums in the community go. We also have Julie Freestone, you can raise your hand, who's now joining the board from Richmond and chairing a process where we're going to invite members from other communities who represent organizations in the Latino, the Black communities, etc., and find out what their interests might be in the village, rather than just going and say, hey, we've got something for you. And it might be a different model. One of the things we've talked about on the board is, was the Beacon Hill model the right structure for an organization? The peer-to-peer model is great, but a dues-paying membership model might not be the way to go. There might be other ways we could branch out. So it's a question, it's been on our minds and different efforts over the last 10 years, and it's been a national discussion also. So thank you for raising it. Jan?
I just would like to add one point, and that is that we do offer reduced membership fees, and a lot of our fundraising actually goes to support memberships for people who can't afford the full amount. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Okay, one more question?
Are there any?
Oh, good. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, please.
I would like to meet some African American members. African American members, I'd like to meet some. I'm new. I just started.
Welcome.
I'd like to ask this question. You want us to get in touch with you, but the means is not helpful to us. So can you create a document that will give names, emails, and phone numbers of everyone that you would like us to get in touch with?
Absolutely, and Andy, you want to respond fully to that?
Sure. We do have a member directory, and we ask people to opt, if they're willing for us to have them in the directory. For our volunteers, volunteers, it's a very sacred and special gift that they're giving, and part of that relationship, the way we've structured it, is that they have the option to speak with members if they choose to, via phone or contact, but it comes through the office because it's more important for us to really, for the service to be when they're providing a service, but any follow-up and other stuff needs to happen through the office channel to not...
But I think Roger's question was, if, and we're going to be, that's something that absolutely needs to get raised as a specific suggestion in the afternoon. But the notion of it's like when people say, oh, I have an open office. The idea is to be clear about if you're being, that one of the purposes of today is for anybody to be clear about who do I talk to about what. So that is something that we will be publishing, but we're also trying to get a fuller, instead of throwing that out as an answer, we're trying to have a conversation today about what people need, so we build that to the requirements of what people are asking for. So that's an example of, as we move into the afternoon and look at opportunities to improve channels of communication and engagement, what are concrete ideas people have that would make your life easier?
So Laura, I just want to say that in terms of being able to reach the heads of teams, I think that is very important. And Andy, maybe we can have that on the website, the team leaders with their email addresses, because that would make
Yeah, so we're open to doing it and wanting to design something that makes sense. So Andy, I'm going to ask you to first just give us some movement, and then Pat and I are going to, now, we're not taking a break, because what would happen with 5 bathrooms and 90 people is that we wouldn't see people for half an hour. So misery is optional. Anybody who needs to get up and make any kind of adjustment, please do that. What's coming now is that we're going to do a little bit of movement. Then I'm going to explain the breaking into the purpose of the small groups. Our wizard, Pat Carvalho, here is going to help us move into those small groups. We're going to have conversations facilitated in those groups, and then we're going to reconvene and discuss what came out of them. So that's where we're headed.
So this is going to be a 1-minute stretch. Don't go anywhere. Just stay where you are, because we're going to be directing you where you need to go. So everyone, kind of given this opportunity, stand up and just stretch your arms up. Turn side to side. Wave your arms. Be a big ocean. We'll make an ocean. You can open up your voice. Open up your voice. Okay, bounce it a little bit. Just bounce. Just with letting your arms and your arms and your head a little loose on the thing. Okay. Now, and feet. I see the feet moving. Just shake out your legs a little bit. All right. So now we're going to bring our total attention to Pat Carvalho to describe, or to Laura or Pat to describe where we're going next.
Okay. First, I'm going to give everybody listening up. First, I'm going to give what's going to be happening in the groups. And then, so here's what the deal is. The conversations will be organized around 3 questions. So those of us who are facilitators will figure out a way to manage the given time to get to 3 rounds of conversation and have a wrap-up conversation. In 50 minutes, we're going to reconvene. I'll come around, but in about 50 minutes, we're going to reconvene as a full group. Each group will have identified one person who will share some of the highlights of your conversation. These are the different ways we'll be capturing the conversations. Number 1, the facilitators will be reporting back kind of what were their impressions, what were the things that really struck them. Number 2, when we're in the full group and discussing the themes, we will be taking notes about what happens from the groups and in the full group. And third, at the very end, there'll be a card that you have, so everyone will be asked to give the one idea that you want to make sure comes out of today. So those are all the different ways we are committed to.
Are you the people that advise people in the province? Only a certain amount of you to go around for everything. Dan, would you have her? You're a member. And I'm supposed to start on the answer. No, well, what I do want to get to is
position. You know anybody who could?
Should we encompass the rule of?
That's a good question.
Get him talking. Often one thinks of evolution as increasing in number.
Tech support, hiking with the hiking part of a wonderful group of 17 or 8 months and my husband Tuesday, so that's my socialization in high school.
I did not expect to stay involved. I'm totally into it. I just thought it was like help planning.
Yeah, but then would be how to enjoy it. So what do you think the question?
So is that's kind of the question, what have you found something confusing or frustrating? This is number 2, have you found something confusing or frustrating? That is your inability to get the kind of help you needed when you needed it.
Start by on the second page of the renewal there, write down all the information. I came into the office today.
I would rather, let me see if I get this, rather just be able to say it isn't okay. Okay, we'll come back to it. Don. No, I missed that. She said the website was confusing. Oh, yeah. The website's confusing and having to respond to every out of the member Don will go and then here's the question. That is very discouraging. It's just, it's too Okay, so are we ready now to go to the next one? Wisdom. Okay, what's the Yeah, what is our solution?
Okay, the next question is, we are a dynamic and growing organization. What, if anything, have you found confusing or frustrating? And we've been saying a little bit about that.
Just don't know about the things that are going on. And really, there were complaints this year about communication. It wasn't deliberate. It wasn't that nobody wanted anyone to know anything. It's just that it didn't all get out in a timely manner. No, it's also a timely manner. In other words, a group field of forms and looks like it's successful, and nobody lets anybody else know that this group exists and that we should replicate it. And I think that that's one of the real problems going forward, is how do I find out what your group is doing, and how do you find out what her group is not doing? In other words, the communication, it's part of why we started the neighborhood groups way back. was that we realized that and that was when we were only 250 and going to 300, that, well, wait a minute, there's too many people. We can't know what everybody's doing. We can't know what's working and not working. And so the neighborhood groups, I would say, have been one of our most successful things. And as you heard, we have input around
Okay, here's the plan. There were 15 groups, theoretically. Some of them may have shifted. We have, for each group, I'm going to go through them. Group number 1. Someone from group number 1 is going to stand up. We'll make sure they are mic'd. And they're going to share 2 or 3 seed ideas.
Question number 1, which was what matters most to people. We had clear communication, evolution of programs to accommodate changing demographic, more communication with board of directors and to understand how decisions are made, and finally, to get volunteers, requests for volunteers answered for sure. Okay, the second question, what we find confusing or frustrating. We need a channel for knowing what committee members actually need so that people can step up. And I can't remember, I think so, that's one. The third question, suggestion for improving. Well, smaller groups in the neighborhood so we know who lives close to us, and quarterly open meetings with topics listed in advance.
Connections was important, especially, for new people. And one of the things that came out of that was being mindful of new people and including diversity, and perhaps there needs to be an interest group on that since that is a complicated issue. Ongoing transparency was one of the things. I think that's being addressed, but it's something we're interested in. We also were interested in a membership-wide format, like what we're having right now, and maybe doing that at least 3 times a year. And having it be generated from whatever we want to talk about, so we get to have a bigger idea of what the membership at large is like, instead of just people we know. Kudos for the programming and the variety of that. And another thing was being clear about our access to information within Ashby Village. And I think that's also going to be improved, but we've had some confusion about that.
Thank you, Charlotte.
So we all agreed that, communication with a big C was the main point, and we had some specifics. One was that it's really confusing about policies. Who makes them, how they're made, when they're made, what do you do about getting a ruling about something? The example we used was, what if you get someone at the living room chat who is just sort of maybe not someone we want here? What do you do about that? Who's responsible for that? Do you call Andy right away? Do you call Sue in? What do you do? So there's lots of other things like that, I'm sure. We want a directory of all of the committees, who the chair is, who we reach out to, so that when we've got questions, again, it's not always having to contact someone in the office, get up their priority list, when all you wanted was a name and a phone number. And that also then gives us the structure of the committees. And that, a lot of that has to be intuitive now. And the last thing, well, almost the last thing, was a list of all the acronyms in the material that you give to new members. It's really confusing. I've been here for a year now and I'm still confused. And the privilege of being the person who takes the notes is I'm going to add an idea of my own, which is the volunteer training is fabulous. It's sophisticated, it's complex, it's comforting. We need something like that for people who are volunteers on committees, so that you also had some sense of how you fit in and where the lines were.
Okay, and I know it's try to model moving faster. Okay, so 3 key ideas that came out of our group was that we felt it was really important to have a better sense of community and get to know members better, find a way for us to get to know members better. The other thing was to improve both intra-village and inter-member communication, come up with mechanisms for that, and then encourage new ideas and new leadership.
So there were a couple of ideas, basic ideas that came up that, and we didn't always stay with the program. One of them was as the village grows and gets larger and larger, it's harder for new people coming in to meet people and to make friends. And one of the suggestions was, which I actually think was a really good one, is that we set up a buddy system for new members. So that every new member has somebody that they can get to know fairly well. The second big issue was, if somebody has an idea for a new activity, how do they make that happen? And it's not clear to people exactly how that would occur, and so that procedure should really be made public and clear to people. And the third one was that the reliance on just email and on the website is not going to serve all of our members, and I think that, and the suggestion that we also need a print mailing list of some of the materials that we only distribute, or will mainly distribute via the web and email.
You know, Eric is in charge of programs. We're not really clear what that means. So having a little more definition on the org chart would be very helpful.
Great.
Oh, and it was very hard to hear.
Yeah. Yes. That's something we heard, and it's something we need to get better at, is accommodating those of us who are hearing challenged and finding ways to use space and quiet to be able to make sure everybody's truly included. So thank you for that. 9, Sue.
We kind of repeat what's going on here. There were details that I can write down and send in later, but question 1, communication. Question 2, communication. Number 3, communication.
We are going to look forward to the specific suggestions.
So what matters most, in addition to diversity in communications, was respite for caregivers. Many members are caregivers. It's been a topic discussed a lot. It needs more attention. What was confusing, like everyone has said, is who to contact on issues. And also, if you're not so extroverted, how do you get to be tied into this village? In terms of strengthening communications, one of the things asked were, could we possibly have gotten these 3 questions ahead of time so we could have thought about them before we came to this event? Also, again, who to ask about what, and a point was made, also interesting, if you don't know who to ask, if you send your question to info@ashbyvillage.org, someone will look at that and direct your question to the best person to answer it. So again, that's info@ashbyvillage.org.
Holy question. Okay, should we continue to grow in size? Because we've reached our 400, which was our max, and now should we continue?
also a perception of cliques. Some people are naturally gregarious, other people are shy. Otherwise, a lot has been covered. But what we thought was really important was to have more of these small groups so that we can comfortably talk with each other about what we think. So we think maybe every 3 months, every 6 months. The first part, most people thought was, again, like any bureaucracy, from the top down. But what really brought people together were these discussion groups.
Lots of duplication. Our group, there was some expression of joy and contentment with the feeling of community that Ashby Village provides. That came out early and was very clear. Next came concern about the lack of clarity about how to be a member. The example was, how do I ask for a ride home? And it turns out there are insurance issues that are abroad here for Ashby Village. I don't know what the answer is to, but it was kind of an example of someone not quite knowing how you do this. So I don't know if we need a handbook, I doubt it. But clearly one of the, there was unanimity on the need for more diversity and raising that as an issue in the organization. Better? Okay. Okay, and then lastly, somewhat largely raised by me, was the outrage of the oral environment today. Sound. Never ever do this again. My wife is losing her hearing. I know what's involved. And we had someone with severe hearing loss in our group. And we were crowded together. We were small and we could barely hear each other. That is an outrage. You must not do that again. Why are we here?
On the other hand, the sensitivity towards organizing it, that people like me with a severe hearing loss could hear what was going on. And I was just so delighted when I walked in and saw that the first 2 rows were devoted to folks like me.
Yeah.
But I'm in total agreement with what you said. I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't hear anything.
As someone who is participating in the hearing loss interest group, I think it's something that the village needs to continue to improve our way of thinking about it. It's an invisible disability. It's a,
Question 1, basically the focus was about 2/3, 1/3 community as opposed to services. That's going to change for many different groups. Second question, some outrage as to the volunteer member dichotomy, people who have had off-channel communications with volunteers feel like they've been censured, and I know this is an ongoing problem, but it's what we talked about. And third, clarity of terminology. Quite a few buzzwords. Do we even know what community means? I think I do. I know you know different. Group 13 checking out.
That's group 14, and we have 3 points. Better way to find your niche. Programs that foster more one-on-one connection, which have been told. Encourage continuing to explore more diversity, which you talk. And frustrating, nothing frustrating. This is the best run organization I know.
Well, our group, I won't repeat what the others did about the newcomers, but that seems to be one of the high priorities that needs some kind of change. And our suggestion was, just like we have the all day, it's not all day, but a couple of hours that we do for volunteer training, that we have a new member training. I mean, that would hopefully take care of it. And the other thing that seems to be, two other things that we are unhappy with and think can be helped. One is the weekly or monthly meeting, and I use as an example one that I've already discussed with Eric, where it says on the list, later on. Nobody knows what later on means, what later on is doing, what later on could communicate to the rest of the group. There should be some way that we all come to understand what is later on. And if they're doing something good, we want to do it too. Okay? And last but not least is, and I'll call it the social hour instead of happy hour, because I understand in the future we might not be able to drink if we go to certain other facilities. We think that there should be some way in which this whole social hour becomes truly social, both for new members and for old members. If you go to happy hour and you walk in, this one's talking to that one and that one's talking to that one. Nobody looks at you, nobody says a word. And we think that that can be easily remedied by somebody from a neighborhood, perhaps inviting a new member or an old member. Do you want to go with me to park? Let's all, let's go together and let's talk and meet some of the other people.
So Pat has cards she is going to be giving out. If you've heard one idea that you want to make sure is followed up on, the one idea you are most passionate about, this will give us another way to read the pulse of our community.
Laura, before you start, stop. This is from all the gang.
This is from everyone. This is from the board and your staff and everyone here.
All right, so we got a lot of information today. We are going to gather that. We had minutes taken. We're going to be the group that had planned this, the program leadership team, the communications interest group, some of the folks who are here who are going to help with the follow-up are going to get together and have a chance to download, talk about what we heard and what the next steps are. So that will be happening. It's scheduled for about 10 days from now. So, and we'll be reporting out in our upcoming Village Voices about what the status is and how we're responding. So thank you again for all the information. I just wanted to end with a recognition that this is our 10th anniversary year, as you probably all know. And we've scheduled, as you will be hearing, 10 for 10 programming series. 10 events that recognize who we are as an organization, a community, and a village. This series was launched June 30th in the conversation that heralded I didn't know this term, nonagenarian, or 90-plus person, Betty Reed Soskin, 97 years old. There are 3 upcoming events I want to share with you this year. So later this month, there is a presentation, My Life in Food, by acclaimed restaurateur, chief winemaker, and author Narsai David. Saturday, October 26th at the Unitarian Universalist Church. It'll be followed by a wine and cheese and a silent auction, which is going to feature a variety of really wonderful dining opportunities and overnight accommodations. So we really invite you to come to that. Early next month, there's a 10-mile hike over the Bay Bridge that Pat Carvalho has initiated. The Golden Gate Bridge, not the Bay Bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, and as part of the Play It Forward volunteer program. That's Saturday, October 12th. So if you're up for that, join that. And then finally, at noon Thanksgiving Day, there's going to be a potluck right here for members who want to be with others and celebrate and give thanks together. So again, that was initiated by Pat. I think it'll be a great thing for our community. So another remarkable, unexpected thing happened for this 10th anniversary. And it was one of our volunteers and her member were in conversation, and they decided to each step forward to express their appreciation to Ashby Village to the village that connected them, and to provide an example for others. And they chose to give $10,000 to celebrate 10 years.
Wow.
Want to thank them, but that has stirred the imaginations and the initiative of others, and we've had 4 other of our members or volunteers that have stepped forward and donated that as well. We've on the board level, we've been really encouraging and talking about the importance and value of this 10th year, and really raising the funds so we can move into the next decade with a real ground under us. And so people have doubled and tripled their giving, and we've already reached over $110,000 in our annual campaign that's aiming at $200,000. So I just want to it's quite remarkable. And we will have our annual appeal coming at the beginning of November, but please consider Ashby Village as an organization that really wants and needs your support. So you'll be hearing, finally, on Friday, May 8th, and this is another exciting thing that's happening. We are having our 10th anniversary gala luncheon at the Claremont Hotel. And the Claremont Hotel has become one of our first corporate sponsors. They will be sponsoring the event, and it's going to be a fabulous gathering. So please mark your calendars, May 8th, and you'll be hearing more about it. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us today and for being part of this valuable Ashby Village community. Thanks much, and have a beautiful rest of the day.
What's your reaction to that? What's your reaction to the forum?
I think it was creative. I think people were very honest and speaking from the heart. I think it was important for us to do this event and to hear many points of view, and for people to feel engaged in the ways that this
You
invited.
have been so involved with Ashby Village for many years. So could you just say some of the riches that you've gotten from being involved?
Well, from being involved, you can see from who was here today. I have met the most marvelous people at a point in my life when I didn't think I had room for one more friend. I've got this whole community, and it's really stunning and marvelous for all of us. I came, initially I thought for the services because I had a husband who was dying, and I thought, oh my God, I can't do this alone. And I've stayed for the amazing community and for the opportunities that it has given me to give back to community, because I've been involved since before the launch.
Thank you so much. Okay, great. Okay, so what are some of your key reactions about the forum today?
The forum?
Yeah.
I was pretty upset with the sound environment. The fact of the matter is, we're getting old, and things are falling off of us. Things are going away. And I think hearing is a pretty common disability. And if you want people to actually have a sense of engagement and involvement, then they have to be able to know what's going on. And if your hearing is really bad and the sound environment is terrible, you don't know what's going on.
How could they have improved it today, do you think?
I have no idea. Maybe prearrange another space where you have breakout rooms we don't have that kind of money. So, I know it's unrealistic, but I think for a group that's about the aging, that's one of the first things you want to make sure is that sense of inclusion. I can actually hear what's happening. That's fundamental. I love Ashby Village. I'm one of the founding members.
Oh, could you say something about that? So what is it you love about Ashby Village?
Well, the fact of its existence, that it's the support we all need, or even if we don't use it, to know it's there, and it's a wonderful idea. I mentioned someone in Kaiser recently, they were just so entranced. Oh, you know Ashby Village, we have a great reputation. I love that, to be part of a group that has a decent reputation for doing good. And I like the people, and I'm sympathetic to the diversity problem. It's a problem a lot of communities have. It's just a wicked one. Anyway, I just like the organization. You're entirely welcome. Okay.
Then you both can talk. Right. Yeah, what I wanted to say is that this is work that I do a lot, and I love the work I do, but being able to do this, because there was such clear intention about what we wanted to do, the spirit, the content, and the dialogue that went into that, so that everything was co-created. So by the time I got to do my work, the agenda had been set, the questions had been framed, Pat and staff did all of the logistics, figuring out the small groups and the break, because the way you make large groups work is impeccable engineering. Right. And that support was before and during was amazing. So this is work that, if every piece of work I did was this joyous and this easy, I would be a happy person.
I was so pleased with how engaged the group was. You have this idea about a communications forum, and you don't know who you will attract or what they'll have to say. The feeling was very positive. It felt like another community building exercise.
Yeah. And that is the best way to build community, is have people have real conversations about what matters to them. That's how you build community, not exercises of social interaction. It's this. It's what do you care about? What are you willing to do about it?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay.
Okay.
Peace.